Okay, so it looks like we're live. So just want to welcome people into the space. So today we're live streaming on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. If you're watching this, definitely please feel free, to put any comments or questions in the comment section on whatever platform that you're watching us on, whether it's Twitter or Facebook. We love to hear what you have to say, and of course, engage you throughout, our entire conversation. So I'm super excited to be sharing virtual space with you all today. So I really want to welcome you all to the Day to End Solitary Confinement. My name is Johnny Perez, and I work as the director of United States Prison Programs for the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, and we are a nationally faith-based organization working with coalition partners across 20 different states to advance legislation seeking to end the torture of solitary confinement. Um, One of the reasons that I'm here is because I'm a solitary survivor myself, and I know firsthand the torture of solitary confinement, how it feels, what it smells like, the fear that people feel when they're in there. And I was lucky enough to be able to survive those walls. However, there's still so much work to be done across the country. And today we're specifically focused on California. And while I'm in California, I want to have special acknowledgments to the California Coalition and people working on immigration detention and reform, not only in California but across the country. We really appreciate your work of getting us this far. This getting us this far. So totally, please chime in if you are a solitary survivor yourself. Please drop your name in the comments. Tell us what state you're coming from and your thoughts about solitary. What would it mean to you to end solitary confinement? So just really appreciate you. So now I'll take the moment to introduce my co-host and or fellow host, I should say, Dolores Canales, and also followed by Ole. Thank you so much, Dolores. Sorry, my apologies. I'm actually passing it to Ole. Go ahead, Ole, introduce yourself and welcome, folks. Thank you.
My name is Olayemi Olurin, but everybody should feel free to call me Olay and make your life as easy as humanly possible. I am a public defender in New York City. I am a political commentator and a professional loudmouth in the name of advocacy that needs to happen. And I'm here today because listen, we know the issues. We know we have an unjust legal system that masquerades as being about criminal justice. We've heard about solitary confinement, but so often the issues that plague us most, that harm our communities, that have lasting impacts, the stories behind bars are the ones that you don't hear. They're the ones that you deliberately hear, you don't hear, so that you can't see the real advocacy that needs to take place happen. And I feel like in doing work to resist an unjust criminal system, so often what it calls on us to do is to bring awareness. And eventually you bring awareness, and then people ask you after that, well, what can I do? How do I help? And so often we feel so powerless in that system, but we can do a lot. We can influence our legislators. We can encourage them to change the tides. And I am here because I want to help us do our role in not just highlighting and bringing awareness to solitary confinement and all of the atrocities that have persisted in these California prisons, but more importantly, we have an amazing opportunity with the Mandela Act to drastically change that, to change the lives of thousands of people that have already suffered in solitary confinement, and maybe prevent thousands more people from suffering just by encouraging Governor Newsom to simply sign his name on a paper, to use the power that was given to him by Californian voters. So that's why I'm here today, to help us get to that place. And I'm delighted. Dolores.
Sorry about that. Hi, thank you so much, Olay and Johnny, both. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank everyone for joining us today around these very important issues, right? With so much to do and so much in our schedules, those that are taking the time out, you're greatly appreciated for being here. And, one of the reasons that I am here is I am a solitary survivor. I have experienced solitary confinement, isolation, and my son is also a solitary survivor and participated in three of the hunger strikes that took place in California. this issue is very personal to me. It also became very traumatizing when I used to hear it conveyed that solitary confinement did not even exist, but yet I knew that I sat in perpetual isolation. And you know why this bill is so significant to me is because the Mandela Act, if you read through it, it covers the broad range of isolation and it defines solitary confinement. We often think of the SHU terms that exist in California or administrative segregation, but the truth of the matter is solitary confinement exists throughout our state in detention facilities, in county jails. And so you know, oftentimes deaths take place in these facilities. We have the ACLU reports, we have the DOJ reports of the numerous deaths that take place in immigration detention facilities and county jail facilities, administrative segregation, and the SHU. And so this is important to me because it's people's lives on the line. And so I really thank everybody for being here. And now I would like to pass it back over to my colleague, Johnny Perez.
Nice. Thank you so much. You know, and I realized that, you know, when we talk about solitary, right, we're talking about 23 to 24 hours a day, you know, people spent in a space no bigger than their bathrooms, you know, little to no meaningful human contact, you know, almost no programs. You know, I myself was in a cell that I couldn't even see further than 6 feet ahead of me. It's part of the reason I wear glasses to this day. Many of us wear glasses to this day. You know, many people have lost their lives, you know, to this practice. You know, today, before we go into our conversations and talk to the number of supporters and guests that we have today, you know, I do want to set the intentions for the day. And, you know, what that means is that what I want to do is that I want us to center ourselves in terms of why we're here, right? And then if just really describe one word that you hope to get out of all of this. And then for me, before I pass it over, you know, to both Lorraine and Dolores, like one word in terms of what my intention, you know, for today, you know, is for us to walk away a little bit closer to humanity, since solitary is so much torture. I know that's more than one word, but I want to say my intention is love. I'll pass it either to Ole or Dolores.
Hi, everybody. My one word is progress. My one word is progress. No battle is won in a day. This is a problem that has gone on before us. This will not totally end things. This will be something we continue to battle and fight for every day to keep moving us far, far closer towards a world that's divested from prisons altogether. But today is a day in the right direction. So I'm here for us stepping forward in progress. How do we get closer to that goal? So progress is my word. Dolores, what about you?
Hi, thank you. Yes, there's so many words, right? But I think I'm going to go with perseverance. We've seen from other states that sometimes you're in this for the long haul, and that we have to keep moving forward. We have to persevere and just carry on in hope.
And Dolores, I know that you're about to, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were finished. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thank you.
I just wanted to encourage people who are watching on the various channels to please put your one word in the comments, put one intention that you may have, you know, for today, you know, so please feel free to engage in the comments. Dolores?
Yes, thank you so much for that, Johnny. Yes, please definitely drop your word right there in the chat, and let's keep each other built up with those intentions. And right now, I'd just like to take a moment. We have been on a 24-hour fast. A fast is often looked at as just a time of spiritual renewing, you know, just whatever your belief is, whatever your hope is in doing this, and also a reflection and honor of the hunger strikes that took place. And so right now, I would like to introduce somebody very dear to me, very important to me, and that has just been a powerful advocate in this space. And he comes from a perspective of not just all the book knowledge that we need, but true personal life experience. And I would like to introduce to you Kevin McCarthy. Kevin?
Good morning, everybody. I apologize. My camera's acting up. I've been trying to access it. I can't get it on. So, you know, my apologies to you all. But, you know, I remember in 2010, you know, we were just, you know, fed up with administrative regulations, which placed and retained us in solitary confinement indefinitely over nothing. It was a sham process. You know, if we said hi to one another, that was deemed a gang affiliation. You know, the gang investigators always pressured people to debrief and told them, hey, if you want better healthcare, if you want to use the phone, if you want X, Y, and Z, you know, you need to debrief. And they broke a lot of people that way. But in doing so, you know, they forced them into, you know, making up lies about us. And, you know, and that's come to light, you know, through the Ashker versus Brown lawsuit and through the court monitoring. But we were just at that point to where we were ready to sacrifice ourselves and die, you know, rather than, you know, sit in those conditions. You know, and if that doesn't prove that it's torture, that 30,000 people are willing to put their lives on the line, then I don't know what is. But you know, we had our two hunger strikes in 2011 and one in 2013. The 2013 one went 59 days, and you know, the Department of Corrections, you know, agreed to change their ways, and you know, they haven't. You know, it's embedded in their culture. You know, they have a culture which you know, is like egotistical. They won't allow you know, any change. You know, they want to be in control, they want power, and they have an economic incentive to place and retain as many people in solitary confinement as long as they can. They receive $20,000 more per year per person held in solitary confinement rather than the general population. And you know, now 10 years later, you know, Governor Newsom, you know, has the chance to put this to an end, to put this inhumane and barbaric practice, you know, behind us, and in the torture. You know, he can't. There's nothing he can do or the legislature can do to restore our health. You know, to undo the torture that's already been done, to bring back the people who lost their lives in the hunger strikes or who committed suicide because they were so desperate to end their living conditions. But he can protect future people coming into the criminal justice system from this inhumane and torturous practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin. Thank you for sharing and just for everything that you've been through. And then now you're out here advocating to change these conditions for those still inside. And so now we'd like to play a short video for those that might be joining that want to know more about solitary confinement. This video will describe a little bit more in depth, just a really quick, I think it's like 3 or 4 minutes.
In July 2013, 30,000 state prisoners went on hunger strike in California. The strike lasted for 2 months. It was the second one since 2011. The prisoners were protesting solitary confinement, what many people consider to be a form of torture. In solitary, your world is a gray concrete box. You spend between 22 and 24 hours a day alone in your cell. Your bed is a concrete slab with a thin mattress. 3 times a week, guards shackle you and take you to the showers for 15 minutes. For exercise, you pace around another concrete box. Sometimes a bit of ceiling is uncovered. This is the only time you'll see the sky. As a punishment, the use of solitary confinement is often an arbitrary decision. Nearly 3,000 people are held in Pelican Bay State Prison in Crescent City, California. Over a third are in solitary, most of them because of quote-unquote gang affiliation. But that's a meaningless phrase. Gang affiliation might mean reading a book by a Black Panther, or drawing Aztec patterns, or even having a tattoo. But Pelican Bay isn't alone in this. Around the country, you can land in solitary for your art, your reading, your beliefs, your gender status, your sexual orientation, or your friends. Women have ended up in solitary after reporting being raped by guards. Transgender prisoners are often put in solitary just for being trans. Prisons say this is for their protection. There is no limit to how long someone can be held in solitary confinement, and very little evidence is needed to justify holding a person in solitary indefinitely. At Pelican Bay, hundreds of people have spent over a decade inside. According to the UN, 15 days in solitary confinement is torture that can cause permanent psychological damage. William Blake, who's been in solitary in a prison in New York State since 1988, said, "Dying couldn't take but a short time if you or the state were to kill me. In SHU, I have died 1,000 internal deaths." Solitary also enables abuse. The Dallas Six were inmates in Luzerne County. In 2009, they contacted human rights groups to complain about torture by guards. According to the Six, in the privacy of solitary, guards would starve prisoners, beat them, and strap them to restraint chairs for up to 18 hours at a time. In April 2010, guards beat and restrained a fellow prisoner. The Six covered their cell windows to draw the attention of a superior. In response, guards beat them bloody, and the prison charged them with rioting. The prison didn't explain how people can riot if they're locked alone in their cells. According to a lawyer for the Center for Constitutional Rights, prisoners in solitary are never granted parole. Because of this, a person sentenced to between 5 and 20 years can often spend the full 20 incarcerated. Prisoners' best hope for staying out of prison after release is maintaining bonds with loved ones while they're inside. But solitary destroys families. Those in solitary aren't even allowed contact visits. It was only after going on a brutal hunger strike that Pelican Bay inmate Gabriel Reyes got to hug his daughters. It had been 18 years. Many prisons even ban phone calls for those in solitary confinement. Personal letters may never be delivered. Books may be taken or withheld. This past November, U.S. officials told a United Nations committee that, quote, "There is no systematic use of solitary confinement in the United States." But as of 2013, this country was holding over 80,000 people in solitary confinement, some of whom were only 14 years old. Because of press and protests, there have been tiny reforms. Pelican Bay is reviewing the prisoners isolated because of gang affiliation. In September 2014, a memo by New York City's Correction Commissioner Joseph Ponte promised that Rikers Island would stop locking teens in solitary by the end of the year. But it's not enough. 80,000 humans remain alone in concrete boxes. When will they be out?
Thank you for sharing that. Hello? Yes, thank you for sharing that video. And I would just like to clarify, there was 3 hunger strikes in the state of California. It was the first one was July 1st, 2011. The second one, which was not mentioned in the video, but very significant because 12,000 incarcerated people participated in it. It was September 26th, 2011. They immediately launched that second hunger strike because after the first one and that they were promised some of the negotiations, they were given a wall calendar and a beanie cap. And they immediately saw that CDC was, going back on the demands that were set forth. And so they launched a second one. And then the third one, which is, known to be the largest and longest in the state of California, with 30,000 people taking place, was July 8th, 2011. And so that is just one thing that I wanted to clarify. And also, I just want to say, the Mandela Bill, this bill was named after Nelson Mandela because it seeks to protect the human rights of everyone in California from the damaging effects of solitary confinement. So, it's really important because this bill would provide one set of clear standards for jails, prisons, and private civil detention facilities on the issues of isolation and solitary confinement. This bill follows a clear roadmap developed in legislation passed by other states that have already pursued these alternatives to solitary confinement, focused on rehabilitation and programming. This includes recent legislation passed in New York and Colorado, and recently Connecticut, and inspiration from the United Nations Nelson Mandela rules, which define prolonged solitary confinement as torture. And so now we have some guests here today, and I'm very, very honored. I would like to ask Vanessa Ramos to please share, if she will, why this bill is important to her. And okay, there you go. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Dolores. And thank you all for being here. My name is Vanessa Ramos. I'm a light-skinned, I'm a brown-skinned woman. I have dark hair that goes past my shoulder, and I'm wearing a beige dress with pink polka dots, and I share that as a form to share my solidarity and to stand in solidarity with many of my friends and family and our community members who may benefit from more of a visual description. My background is blurred. I am bicultural and bisexual, and I am a proud parent. I professionally serve Disability Rights California. I serve on the public policy team, and a huge shout out to the Disability Rights California community who have been pioneers in ensuring that disabled Californians have their rights and their protections upheld. So why this bill is important to me is because I am a solitary confinement survivor. I have a beautiful 21-year-old daughter who, when she was born, I shortly thereafter picked up a charge, and I was held in solitary confinement. As a woman with disabilities, one of the items that I see happen so often is that disability a lot of times is misrepresented and misinterpreted by police and by law enforcement, meaning that there are times that under toxic stress, I may appear to not fit into a quote unquote normal way of behaving, which only becomes exacerbated when force is used or moved towards me. I live with sensory disabilities, and I have a mental health disability. So for me, I understand that being pulled away from like having sensory deprivation, and then being in solitary confinement where I experienced sensory deprivation, then being moved back into general population where there was just a lot of noise, a lot of movement happening without a healthy way of transitioning out, for me, really caused me further harm. So as I say that, I want to take this time, and I apologize. Are we doing a moment now? Is that? Can I get a nod?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. So in this moment, I'd like to take a minute to honor the deaths of Mr. On, who you will hear more about later, and take a moment for those who have died in solitary confinement, the many people who have died while incarcerated, and the people who will die if the inhumane treatment of people that are confined continues. So if you can all please join me, and my word and my intention is restoration. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Vanessa. Thank you for
Yes.
participated in this moment of silence.
Thank you, Dolores. And, before I end, I would also like to uplift that Black and Brown people are overrepresented in prisons, jails, and detention centers, right? So I know that California is doing a lot of work with the California Reparations Report, and we know that this is a step ending the use of solitary confinement for vulnerable populations, such as disabled Californians, youth, and the elderly, right, is truly a step in the right direction, because the people who are mostly impacted are brown and Black people. And I also want to uplift the beautiful LGBTQ community, who many times face the carceral system because of minor crimes that, when we look into it, it's based on survival. So I say this because this is a much larger conversation, right? We're finding that marginalized communities continue to be further marginalized in these settings. And I'm just so proud to share that for me, I have been restored. Parts of me that were taken, that were never meant to be taken, have been brought back to me. And it wasn't through the carceral system. It was through faith leaders, community-based organizations, other survivors, and today the organization that I work for. So I could go on and go on and go on, but I'll stop there. And Dolores, much love to you for all that you have done, for your experience, for your family's experience, and to all on here. I can't wait to hear from the rest of the panelists. And Johnny, I hope to meet you one day in New York. Thank you for what you've done for our community nationwide. And unlock the box. Woo!
Vanessa, thank you so much. You always bring such joy. And I just want to say really quick, when I introduced you, I feel like I know you so well now working with you. And I did forget to say Vanessa Ramos with Disability Rights California. And I know all of us that have been working so hard, just look at ourselves as so connected, right? Just like the hashtag solidarity, not solitary, and being part of this California coalition. And not looking for that individual, but you do so much. You do so much for your community and for the community of all. And so I really want to thank you for your work. And I believe Kevin had to jump off for class. Is that correct? So next, I would like to introduce. Eduardo Dembricky. Edward, I personally know as well. He is a solitary survivor, an amazing human being, filled with so much hope and such a heart and a passion for the youth. I would just like to introduce him right now. He is going to be launching his own nonprofit soon for juvenile justice. He is also a member of CFASC and many other groups. And Ed, are you there? Oh, there you are. Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Ed. So, as a solitary survivor, I would just like to know, what would abolishing solitary mean to you? And if you just want to share a little bit.
Right. It really is something that impacts me to this day. And, when I think about it, when I really went through, and then I remember it really is something that doesn't go away. It's something that affects someday approach life. It's I think in some weird way humans have so much that they do gain some sense of appreciation, are able to get things back. But I don't know that that's a good thing. But one of the things that I'm in the process of doing, having done 13 years in solitary myself, I'm going to be going to a program. It's a trauma center, and it's like a therapeutic post-traumatic to help you kind of just deal with your experiences, whatever they may be. But there's a lot of people out there that have experienced solitary for even less, but different ways, and them is so I'm fortunate to be able to check myself into a facility to the bottom of the experiences that I had, so solitary confinement. And hopefully, I hope to be to have a different perspective or with the effects of the way that a lot of us have been treated. It's unfortunate. And so, if my word would be treatment, my word would be treatment for those that have, and they're strong individuals, even ones that you can't take that away from them, but they deal with it in their own way to this day, on a daily basis without ever understanding has had on them, fully understanding at least. So I think that's about the experience and the Mandela Act. So beautiful that to name it after Nelson Mandela and what he went through in another part of where we are, and I really do hope that it passes and that issues that solitary cause, are addressed. Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for opening up and sharing, sharing about your trauma and still what you're going through ongoing. For our audience members, Ed Dembricki was wrongfully convicted at the age of 15 and spent 24 years in prison, with half of that time being held in perpetual isolation, wrongfully convicted as a youth. And thanks to District Attorney Gascon, he has been fully exonerated. We do have good news. But the effects of incarceration and solitary still linger. And he's a warrior. My heart, he knows I'm his number one fan. And I'm there with him every step of the way to support him in any way possible. And that he has a community right here. So if all this community could just drop your love in the chat for Vanessa and Ed and our next phenomenal, amazing panelist, who is also my dear friend, somebody that I spent time with inside. I would like to bring up April Grayson with the Young Women's Freedom Center. April,
thank you,
hello. So
yes,
it's great to have you here. Thank you so much. And if you just would like to share a little bit, whatever you feel comfortable with, why abolishing solitary is important, what does it mean to you, or, from your personal perspective.
Thank you, Dodie. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending on where you are at in the nation. My name is April Grayson. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I am the policy associate with the Young Women's Freedom Center, as well as a Represent Justice ambassador. I spent over 17 years in the world's largest women's institution in California. And I also have been in solitary confinement as a juvenile, as well as an adult. And for me, when I think about solitary confinement, I think about the mental health and what it does on the mental health of people who are locked up and people who already are locked up with mental disabilities. While I was locked up in solitary, I witnessed people hang themselves and kill themselves based off of the conditions and not wanting to, already suffering and then having more stress added. And a lot of times when we're held in solitary, we're held there pending an investigation or pending something, not even as the outcome of a disciplinary action. So to sit back there unknown, not knowing what's going on, already struggling with the loss of your family, your children, your sentence, and then to know like you're back there and you're hearing people screaming all night long, the officers are not giving you access, you're taking a shower maybe every other day, you're not able to use the phone, everything is brought to you. If you don't have access to finances, like you don't have commissary, you don't have what you need, it just compounds, everything is compounded. And so for me, the word I'm going to bring to the table is solidarity, because I still stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. I have a best friend that is still locked up, that is serving a life without the possibility of parole sentence. And until she's free and until all my brothers and sisters are free and people are not living in harsh conditions that are not safe for their mental or their physical well-being, I support ending solitary confinement.
Thank you so much for sharing, April, and thank you for being here with us today. I am just so proud of you and all the work that you're doing. And this just goes to show that each and every one of you, right? All of us, we are so much more than our experience. We are so much more than our stories. We are the vision ahead. We are the movement and the change, right, that we want to see. And so I thank you. I honor you for all being here and for sharing this. And just please, everybody in the chat, drop love for them. If you want to put your social media handles, April, Ed, Vanessa, if you want to put your social media handles in the chat also so people can follow you, please do so. And right now, we just want to transition into this space as I hand it over to Olay and just say out loud some of the intentions that people have set forth. Thank you, Olay. Take it from here.
Thank you so much, everybody who shared their stories. It's really, really important. It's really, really important at all times in any efforts that we make towards, radically changing the criminal system. It's always important that we hear from the people who are most impacted first, not just because they're most impacted, but because they started these efforts. And this is their movement. They were impacted first. We couldn't possibly know what needs to change if they didn't first tell us what needed to change and how to change it. So I'm very, very grateful. And I want us to make sure that we take note of some of the words that we've heard: progress, treatment, solidarity. These are important things and we must always keep with us. So I'm very, very grateful that we got to hear from the people who actually had their lives impacted. And additionally, I want to take this time for us to hear from some experts in the field, because it's important to remember, so often people think these aren't just emotions. It doesn't just harm the person. This is not an emotional harm. This is not an internal harm, but there's real suffering that people incarcerated feel. And these are long lasting impacts. So I want to take this time to hear from Terry Coopers, who is a psychiatrist, and Juan Mendez, who is a former special appointee on torture to the UN. And we're really, really glad to have them here today to share their insights. So I would pass to Terry.
Thank you, Olay. I'm very excited to be here. The Mandela Act is a very important step. And my word for today is struggle. It's a long struggle. What we want is massive decarceration. Ending solitary confinement is a step in that direction, and we need to take it boldly. Two things about solitary confinement of all kinds, and I agree with people who have said it's not just the SHU, it's in the jail, it's in lockdowns. Two problems. The first is it does not help with the problem of violence and disorder in the jails and prisons. There's two ways we know that. One is that if you study the violence rates after the advent of supermax solitary confinement in the 90s and then into the new millennium, there's no decrease in violence rate or gang membership with the advent of the SHU. Second, there are states that have vastly diminished SHU confinement. Colorado, North Dakota. And when they do that, you would expect the violence rate to go up if the SHU helps the violence rate. But actually, it goes down. And that's because people get out of solitary confinement and take part in productive activities. And that's the greatest way to maintain peace and prepare people for going straight. I won't go over all the damage, but the second point is that there's huge damage from solitary confinement. People who are stable in terms of their mental health get massive anxiety, they have trouble thinking, often become paranoid, they have trouble concentrating and with memory. For instance, I ask people, well, what do you do in solitary? And they say that there's nothing to do. And I say, what about reading? And many people tell me that they don't read because they can't remember what they read the paragraph before or the page before. Compulsive acts, cleaning one's cell 6 times a day, pacing, counting cinder blocks. There's a numbness that sets in. People lose touch with their feelings. And I think the reason is that solitary causes expansive anger. And in order to control the anger, people suppress their feelings. And then they start saying, I feel like a zombie. I don't know what I'm feeling. Then there's despair. The suicide rate in solitary confinement is sky high. It's high in prison and jail in general, but 50% of completed suicides in jail and prison happen in solitary confinement cells. And then there's death by other causes. The mortality rate the year after solitary is sky high. What's the alternative to solitary? Well, first of all, I mentioned massive decarceration. We need very radical sentence reform. We need behavioral health courts and alternatives to incarceration in the community. So decarceration and reducing the crowding, which is one of the big causes of violence in jails and prisons, has to happen. Mental health treatment in the prisons, because when you're in solitary, you can't get mental health treatment. It's damaging your mental health, but it's impossible to be treated in that kind of context. But also, mainly in the community, we need to release people and get them programs for mental health and recovery from substance abuse in the community. And so, while I say decarceration is the main goal, we want those services to be in the community, but meanwhile, we have to provide them from the people that have released from solitary. And then we're going to see the violence rate go down. So I am so honored to be here among especially survivors, because I just want to point out that when you're in prison and you go on a hunger strike, or you even speak out or launch a lawsuit, you are retaliated against, and it's vicious. It can be deadly. So my hat is off to all the survivors who have spoken and all who are listening and all who are out there. It is just really a heroic act, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I would really like to pass to my good old co-host Johnny at this time.
Thank you, Ole. And before I go into talking about solitary, excuse me, about the national um, impacts of solitary, and then talking about a little bit about the Solitary Survivors Network. Dr. Kubers, I want to kind of like get you to flesh out just a few things a little bit. As a solitary survivor myself, sometimes it's just difficult for me to truly comprehend that I'm more likely to die than my counterparts. I'm most likely to die by suicide, homicide, overdose, things like that. Can you talk about a little bit about the long-term consequences of being held in solitary confinement? Many folks need to understand that, one, solitary confinement is not something that people are sentenced to. It's something that the prison or jail or detention center takes on of itself, right? But the consequences are so bad that they last even long after they're released. Can you add an academic perspective to that, or medical perspective to that?
Yes, thank you, Johnny. First of all, there are long-term consequences of people who stay in solitary. The extra case, we just took the group of people who have been in for 10 years, and we got hundreds of them. But lots and lots of people have been in for several years or for 40 years. We just lost Albert Woodfox, who died very soon after his release. He spent 44 years in solitary as one of the Angola Three. The two things I found, and my co-expert Craig Haney found at Pelican Bay State Prison SHU, is a problem with feelings, being in touch with one's feelings. What happens when people are in solitary for year after year, they shut down their emotional life. They lose touch with their feelings. So they say they feel like a zombie, or they feel walking dead. The philosopher Lisa Gunther, has called it social death from solitary. I think, as I said, that it comes from shutting down the anger. You work so hard to shut down the anger, you shut down all the rest of your feelings too. The other is massive isolation. So I found that individuals in solitary, where you can talk to each other, you can yell out into the common airspace, you can talk through a vent, people stop talking to their neighbors, and they just shut down, and they're not interested in relating to other people. Those are two very serious symptoms. Now, if someone has a mental illness, those symptoms make the mental illness a lot worse. We say it exacerbates serious mental illness. But for everybody, to lose touch with your feelings and feel like a zombie, and to seek isolation even more than the SHU requires, those are deadly symptoms and create a lifelong struggle. Trauma is something that we don't cure. We never cure trauma. We have lots of treatment for PTSD and things like that. And I think people who have been in solitary need some kind of help from a sympathetic treating person. But you don't forget the memory. You don't not spend years in solitary after you've spent years in solitary. What you do is you learn to function better, but you walk around with memories and scars and lots of emotional difficulties, particularly in the area of trusting other people, because you've spent so long being massively abused.
I think that was one of the most difficult things for me to truly understand as a solitary survivor, but also as an advocate, to really understand the long-term psychological, emotional, even spiritual impacts and physical impacts of solitary confinement. One thing that the public doesn't, the regular, John Doe, Jane Doe in the United States doesn't know about solitary confinement is that people are released directly from solitary confinement into society, into a place of sensory overload in these spaces. Um, at the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, we're working to identify solitary survivors around the world. We have specific needs when we come out, being able to connect with other supports, to help us re-enter, being able to connect with other people who've experienced solitary confinement, who truly understand the nature of this beast that we're talking about and the torture of it. We talk about survivors, but the truth of the matter is that what you just described, is that the truth is that the long-term consequences of solitary confinement are perpetual, and no one survives solitary confinement. And for this specific group of people, we're more likely to die, than the rest of the population. So if you are a solitary survivor, please drop your name in the comments, drop your location, where you calling from. We'd like to invite you to join our national network of solitary survivors, which is a landing point and community for solitary survivors that are coming out of United States prisons, jails, and other carceral and institutional centers. We look to provide some peer support, collegiality, so whether it's engaging public schools, and just public education and spreading awareness about some of the journey that we've experienced, connecting with other folks, like people just like on this call, right? Dolores, Pam, and others who are leading, state and national campaigns, to end the torture that they've experienced. And honestly, we truly are stronger together than we are separately, and you only see us on the call, but there's actually thousands, if not millions of us. So we really want to invite folks to join, the National Solitary Survivors Network. And you can easily sign up by just going to solitarysurvivorsnetwork.com. Now we're going to switch over into a call of action, because we do want to make sure that we are raising awareness about this. We want to make sure that we're making noise about this. And we have a few calls to action, but you may also have your own call to action. If you are connected to any of these people that we're talking to, if you can just shoot them a text and say, hey, you really need to do this and bring the relief to these people, so please do that. But I'm going to pass it to Ole to share our mass action. Ole?
Listen. Like I said, we're often in a business of awareness, right? Awareness. Let's bring awareness to the issues. And so often people's response to us is, all right, now what can I do? And I know oftentimes, I feel it. I'm like, what do you tell people? What can they do? And so it's an amazing opportunity when there is something we can directly do. And it might sound small. People downplay the importance of activism in all forms, but it might sound small to tweet at a governor. But until you remember that all the governor has to do is sign his name on a piece of paper, all right? So they do what we demand, all right? That's the reality of it. That's the end of the day. Gavin Newsom is a politician who do be on Twitter. He stays on social media all day. A politician who apparently has presidential aspirations. So we need to encourage him to do what we need him to do. He said he wanted a campaign of racial justice. He wanted to see that happen. So we need to make sure we demand our politicians actually put some oomph behind those words. We don't want any more empty rhetoric. All he has to do is sign his name, and we could change what has been just, there are no words to put to what the abuse is or the reality of the system that we allow to persist in this country. But he could change that with his signature, and all we need to do is lend our voices to it today. So listen, tweet at Joe Biden, tweet at Gavin Newsom, tweet at any politician you could think of in California who you think might have influence. If it's a politician who crosses your mind and you think they should hear about it, you tweet at them now. So I say you can text Biden to 52886, you can text Newsom to 52886, and you can tweet at them. But you know their names. You can get on Twitter right now and at those people, and I encourage you to do that right now. Put your voice behind it and make these people, make them do what you put them in office to do.
So yeah, we'll take a moment. Definitely text that right now, and just really echoing, echoing. Please text Newsom to 52886. Please do that throughout. If you can text more than once, do it. Text it. Drop the text in the group chat. Make sure that everybody gets it. So that way we can really raise awareness around these issues. We're going to switch lanes just a little bit, and we will come back to that mass call of action again before the time is up as a reminder. I'll take a moment to just acknowledge the comments. For folks who commented already, thank you for chiming in and supporting us, and also for sharing this on your live streams. No matter where you are and how you're sharing this. This work doesn't get done inside. It only gets done when we come together in one voice, one mind. Um, switching gears just a little bit to really took more of a macro view and looking at the national landscape. And it's important that folks understand that while we are talking about California, the state of California, which has a huge track records for these atrocities and these different forms of torture. This is a national issue. I just remind people that we currently have an administration that has promised to end the torture and use of solitary confinement, right? And we also have a number of states that have done a number of different changes inside of within their respective states. We've seen New York, severely limit the use of solitary confinement. We've seen Connecticut also limit the use of solitary confinement. We've seen New Jersey, do the same. We've seen Louisiana limit solitary confinement for young people because yes, we do live in a country that puts children inside of these spaces. We do live in a country that places women who are pregnant inside of these spaces. We do have a country that places the elderly, the physically disabled, people with mental health challenges inside of a cell, literally no bigger than your closet. And as you can hear from the stories here, there is no amount of time that we spend in these spaces. While they spent 13 years in solitary confinement. Barbara, I think if you're not speaking, mute yourself. Not just Barbara, anyone. Thanks. But again, right, when I served 3 years in solitary confinement, I spent 13 years in solitary. Or Jack Morris, who sits on our advisory council, so spent 30 years in solitary confinement. Again, these are spaces no bigger than your parking lot, your average bathroom. If I stick my daughter, who's 22 years old, inside of a bathroom for 24 hours, 23 to 24 hours a day, and I do that not only for a week, but for a month, but for years or decades at a time, that should be criminal at the highest form. But yet we live in a country where it is legally happening. So we want to call. We've invited Victor Pate from the Halt Solitary Confinement campaign in New York. Also invited Pamela Wynn from Restore Her in Georgia, and we've also invited Barbara Fair from Stop Solitary Connecticut, one of our business leaders from Connecticut. Hopefully she can. Having a few technical difficulties, but we'll come on. And I see that Victor is also not on, but I'm confident just sharing some perspective there. So we'll start off with Pam. Pam, if you can just briefly introduce yourself. Talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, and also, talk about how maybe if you can talk about, what would it mean to not only, advance, the relief of solitary confinement to people in California, but beyond, and especially to people like you who are organizing in Georgia and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Johnny. My name is Pamela Wynn. I am the founder of Restore Her US America. We're located here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the South. For me, I served a 78-month federal sentence. I was pregnant. I was placed in solitary for about 8 months. My baby died. I was still placed in solitary, like directly after this occurred, before it occurred as well, not receiving any medical care. So for me, the work that I do is to end the horrible practice of solitary. I have been successful here in Georgia to end solitary confinement for incarcerated pregnant women, as well as throughout the South, with the most recent bill being passed and signed into law in Alabama in April of this year. So, like Johnny said, we do place our women, pregnant women, in solitary confinement, as well as our kids, as well as our mentally ill. We have no limitations on who we place in solitary, nor do we have limitations on how long we leave them there. For me, I know we started this off with saying a word about what this meant to us. For me, my word is humanity, because there are things that we all have in common. I don't care what your political preference is. I don't care what your morals are, what your values are, but there are definitely things that all of us have in common that we cannot deny for any reason. And the first one is that we are all human beings. The second being, every body, physical body on this earth has a mother, came from a mother. And the third is there is not any unborn or newborn baby that has committed any violation against any law, any crime, or anything to be held guilty or punished for anything. And for those three reasons, we should be banning solitary confinement because we are all human beings, as I stated first, and this practice is torturous. It's also a violation of our Eighth Amendment. We have people that are losing their lives fighting to get to America because they believe in the quote that we give of equality, justice, and freedom for all. But us that have survived being in the box know that that is just that. It's only a quote. If we want to live by our words and be the country that folks are dying here to be, then we must treat our people as human beings and treat them with that same justice, equality, and freedom that we speak about in our national anthem in all of our countries. It's imperative for the governor to sign this bill. I was thankful for everyone rallying around me in all of the states to help me get solitary halted for pregnant women here in Georgia and throughout the South. And I stand in solidarity with you all today in California to say that this bill must be signed. The governor must sign this bill. And we must do anything that we can and we have to get his attention and make him understand that he works for us. We are the constituents that put him in that seat. And if he does not follow our wishes and what we want as human beings, we will also remove him from that seat. And whatever aspirations he has of being president, he can forget about that because it will not happen. You must take care of your people first. Let him be an example of human beings over politics.
I really appreciate that, Pam, and especially the way in which you said it. One thing that I've learned, for when I come out, oftentimes, folks pass policies without being from our communities or reflective of our community. And our community has spoken really loud and clear, not only in the state of California, but across the country, that solitary not only does not work, right, but we actually we do not want it. Instead we have to look at alternatives, and also that it just doesn't help anyone. So I really appreciate you and your work there, specifically to protect women, because you're right. We've all been pushed into existence by a woman, and we need to be even more mindful. Just really echoing of everything that you said. So from Georgia, we're gonna go a little bit up north and go to Connecticut. We do have one of the state campaign leaders from the Stop Solitary campaign, where they recently advanced the Protect Act in Connecticut. However, I'll let Barbara Fair, if you can hear me, you can chime in. Kind of just briefly introduce yourself, talk a little bit about the Protect Act, and again, what does it mean to end solitary? What did it mean to, to really limit the use of solitary in Connecticut, and what it mean to also, do the same in California, which is, one of the biggest states on the West Coast. Thanks.
Thank you, Johnny, very much. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. You can't see me, but I'm glad to at least have an opportunity to be on this. My name again, Barbara Fair. I'm the lead organizer for Stop Solitary Connecticut. And if you want to talk about what we've done, we just passed a bill this past session called the Protect Act, and it addresses solitary confinement. Our major goal is ending solitary. And right now we just have what goes with the Mandela rules, which for me, that's just the minimum standards of care. And I'm asking Connecticut for us to rise above the minimum standards of care. So for California, being the state with the enormous prison population, I think they should be trying to take the lead on this. I've been on this campaign to end solitary for many, many years. Starting out with critical resistance. I testified in the first ever congressional hearing in Philadelphia in 2012. And when I think about that, was in 2012, and here it is 2022, and we're still fighting this. It's just, I don't know, it's just hard for me to understand, because I think it's all about humanity. It's about our own humanity. And if we can't get in touch with that, what is the next generation looking for? What level of cruelty will we okay, because this is government sanctioned. This is government sanctioned torture. It's very sadistic. It's inhumane. And the only way I can see that people can go along with this is that they don't recognize the humanity of people that they're doing this to. Like I said, I've been in this campaign forever, and now for me, it will be um, till I'm no longer around, because at the age of 17, the day my son turned 17, he was actually placed in solitary. He was one of those pretrial people, had a misdemeanor, but because they said he was a behavior problem, which he was, because he's never been put in a cage before in his life, he's never been treated in an abusive manner, so it was not okay for him to just be treated like that. So yeah, they said he was a behavior problem, and at the day he turned 17, they put him in solitary confinement. My son is 40 years old today, and we have struggled all of these years to get my son back. And now we just hope for him to be able to stay stable. And what bothers me the most is that the state that did all this harm to my son at that young age does not have to pay for it. They don't even have to look at the damage. I have to look at that damage. I think about him. I would say he survived it, but he hasn't healed from it. Um, I think about my survival when he was in there. I think about the sleepless nights, the crying spells, depression, the panic attacks, the feeling of helplessness, feeling my son pulling on my spirit, and I couldn't help him. It was crazy for me at that time. But I just kept fighting until I got him out of there. He was in there a little less than 2 months, but at his age and his level of brain development, it destroyed him. And so I got him out too late to prevent the harm. So as I said, it's been a long, long battle. I don't know why it is such a long battle. If we are a humane society, California, like I said, should be the lead, because they have this huge population, so many minds they have destroyed. They need to take accountability. They need to stop closing their eyes to what they're doing to people. And I think they need to sign this bill, and they need to sign it not because of any politics, but because this is about humanity, simple humanity. And our humanity depends on him doing the right thing. So that's all I have to say on the subject. But my intention in continuing this fight is to continue to plant the seeds to actually end solitary. I mean, not just critique it or restrict it, but to actually end this abusive state-sanctioned torture of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Barbara. And I see that Victor's trying to get on and on, so I'll give him a second, and I'm comfortable sharing about New York. But before going, you said something that was really critical, right? Like, our political leaders have an opportunity to lead, and I think that California has a really strong opportunity here, to really be able to lead in this space. So we really want to encourage folks to actually text, and really quick question is text Mandela to 52886. You can do it right on your phone. You can log, you can close the Facebook and come right back on. If this is the only thing you do today, please text Mandela to 52886. And before I go back to Pamela and Barbara to ask you, some questions about what kept you going throughout these, multi-year campaigns, I want to talk a little bit about New York and Victor. Once you're on and you can hear us, or you get technical capacity, please interrupt me. But I just want to mention that the whole Solitary Confinement Act in New York, at the time was one of the, actually even to this day, one of the most progressive pieces of legislation in the country, in terms that it severely limited solitary confinement to just 15 days inside of these spaces. I want to say, people ask, well, why 15 days? Why 15 days? This is at the point, and again, this is the point in which folks, have irreversible damage of being placed in solitary confinement. Of course, even 15 days is too much.
Yes.
Just want to really highlight that we should, really be talking about 0 days and looking at a mechanism of centered on healing and not harm. It's really limited the use of solitary confinement for a number of populations, not because of what they've done, but these people are placed in solitary just because of who they are. Right, we've already mentioned these folks, right? People who, women who are pregnant, folks from the LGBTQI community, people who are disabled, physically have physical challenges, mental health concerns, young people, like you said, Barbara, like your son, was there at a very young age, and that is the story of many mothers that I've sat across and just talked to. Hey, my son is in solitary right now, locked inside the closet. What can I do? How can I help him? And Victor, are you with us? Thank you. Well, I'll say, Pamela and Barbara, you've all continued to lead and have led multi-year campaigns, and this is difficult work, because there are literally lives on the line. With, like right now, we have the opportunity to save lives with just a stroke of a pen. I've read numbers that 50% of all suicides happens inside of these places, right? Just in New York alone, just this year, 14 people have already died in Rikers Island. Most of those people have been held in isolation. And yet our political leaders oftentimes fail to represent the needs of the community. So I'm curious, for those of us who are working to advance this piece, what kept you going year after year? What kept you, alive? And even in some cases, like in the state of New Jersey, that bill was vetoed one year, and then we passed it the following year. So just for context, because we've all been, relatively successful in your spaces, what kept you alive, what kept you going, and what kept the fire burning, that eventually reached, the level of success that you reached, with the acknowledgement that we still have work to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can say, Barbara, again from Connecticut, I can say we had similar circumstances. We got the bill passed the first year, which was monumental in itself, because Connecticut is a very segregated state. So there's very few legislators of color who even relate to our situation. So we got it, but we managed to get it passed, and the governor vetoed it. He put in some other executive order, which really didn't do much of anything. But I wasn't going to give up. Like I said, I was already in this, but once you hurt my son, you destroyed my son. This is a fire that's never going out. And so when we wanted to come back this session, we were told, it's election year, no one's going to want to do it. But I was not hearing that. And so I just kept pushing and pushing, meeting with all different legislators until we finally got it passed again, bipartisan. We got more Republicans on than we ever got before, and we got it passed, and it got signed into order. And now what we're doing is putting together an advisory board and an ombudsman in place, because we don't believe the government will do what they're supposed to do. So we're putting people on that board who actually have a history of caring about incarcerated people, and that's what we're working on now. So for me, the fire is never going to go out.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Pam?
For myself, the thing that kept me going was that I did not want to die in solitary. I wanted to remain alive and vibrant as I am now, to be able to tell my own story, to be able to fight against this thing, and to be able to stand here and see that we have ended solitary. I am partway through that journey. Like I said, we were successful in passing the banning of solitary confinement for incarcerated women here in Georgia, throughout the South. And now we have our current campaign, Out of Isolation into Action, where we are continuing that fight forward to end solitary for all folks, not just pregnant women, but our juveniles, our mentally ill, everyone, disabled. No one deserves to be in solitary, as well as the general population of our men. We are partnering with Southern Center for Human Rights, who have been successful in limiting the amount of days to 15 days in one of our men's prisons here. So we are working effectively and hard to see that Georgia is on that list for next of ending solitary confinement of our people. And as I said, standing in solidarity with every state across the country, because no one should be in solitary anywhere.
Right.
Thank you for that, Pam. Victor, I see you're on. Do you have sound?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
No, completely fine. No apologies needed. And we're almost about to segue into the next segment, but I do think it's important to hear, directly from you as a leader from the Halt Solitary campaign, the significance about ending solitary in California, maybe some insight as to what did it mean for you to end solitary in New York, and what the fight continues to look like there. And if you can do that like in like 2 minutes, I think we're
Okay,
winning.
yeah, so thank you. And I'm gonna talk really quickly and be short. So big ups and solidarity to all my comrades and colleagues and all the success that you've had so far. But as you know, even with that one success, the job is never over. It's a continuing struggle. It's a continuing fight to bring humanity to the inhumanity and the treatment that people receive in our prisons and jails across the nation. So for me, as a healing solitary confinement survivor for myself, when I hear of the successes, I know that it's not just an individual success, it's a collective success. And it means, hopefully, that there will be some relief on the suffering and tortures of our fellow human beings who are in our prisons and jails across the nation. And I think that when you talk about the sufferings, think about all of the things that's happening around the nation, all the things that has happened, right? When you're talking about, we have this constitutional document, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have the Mandela Rule, and speaks to people not being tortured, people not being treated inhumanely. And just think that on our watch across the nation, this is going on at this very moment. Somebody is being tortured, somebody is isolated, somebody is being abused in our prisons and jails, and there should be no solitary confinement anywhere. It should be abolished everywhere. So for me, doing this work for the 8 years that we had to struggle to get this bill passed was a huge success. But guess what? Found out that that was not the only thing that needed to be done, because there's always the after. It's always what happens after, because this is one of the things that we have learned, especially in our spaces and places, that even when you have success in getting that bill passed, it's the process of the implementation to making sure that these different entities are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and making sure that our fellow human beings do receive relief, do receive the things that they need to try to bring them whole again, to make them whole again, to help them in the transformative portion that they need after they have suffered the years of abuse. So I can just say that, big ups to my colleagues. I'm glad and humbled to be here in this group and in this space, and apologies for my technological difficulties. But I think that this is a collective issue. It's not just a one state issue. And I think I heard somebody mention that. This is an all of us issue. And I think by us being here, this space and this place sends a strong message. Newsom needs to sign that bill. He needs to sign it as soon as possible. And we are all here in solidarity to urge and support our fellow comrades in the efforts that they're doing. So thank you for having me. I hope I didn't take too much time.
No, not at all. And I really appreciate you, Victor, and I'm glad that you're here. And before I pass it to Ole for another mass action, I just want to name that although we have about 4 states represented here, there are 20 active legislative campaigns around the country, all seeking to advance legislation around solitary confinement. Arkansas, Connecticut already. We heard from Connecticut. DC, Georgia. We heard from Georgia, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nebraska, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico. We heard from New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Virginia, Washington. And of course, today we're talking about California. Thank you. Ole?
Thank you, everybody. These words were so powerful, like just incredibly powerful. And I wanna echo and really thank Barbara for her story. That was incredible. And in response to, you said, the fact that the system continues to persist is a reflection that I'm not recognizing the humanity in our brothers and sisters. And I want to say, I think it's a failure to recognize the humanity within themselves. I think if there were any level, any true level of humanity and recognition, you would have it for everybody. If you're willing to do that to anybody, I think it reflects a larger problem about the intentionality of our system, because it's not just complicity. They are aware. They know the people driving the system know what's happening. It's about what they prevent the public from knowing, so that the public can't do what we're doing today and demand on our legislators to do more. So that being said, I want us to take this opportunity. Get your phone. You can send a text. And if I want to apologize to anybody earlier if you tried to text Newsom to 52886. The correct word is Mandela. Text Mandela to 52886. That's all you have to do. One text, or you could go directly on Twitter and tweet at Gavin Newsom directly. You can go on TikTok, you can go on Instagram, anywhere, any social media you use. Take this opportunity now. There's more power in numbers. When we come together, we can affect a lot of change. Flood that man's notification. Take your phones out now and text 52886. We can do it now together. Let's take this moment to text Mandela to 52886. Thank you. I want to give everybody a second, because this is an opportunity for us to band together. Rather than any one of us trying to affect change individually, we can take this opportunity, and in numbers we're stronger. And I'd now like to pass to my wonderful, wonderful co-host, Dolores.
Hi, thank you so much, Olay, and thank you to everybody that's right now texting those messages. And next, I would like to introduce two amazing advocates who have been involved with this bill from the beginning. They both work with immigrants in detention and were involved in drafting the Mandela Act. They are Hamid Yazdan and with Immigrant Defense Advocates, and Lisa Knox with the California Collaborative for Immigrant Justice. Hamid, hi, thank you. Are you there?
Hi, Dolores. Yes, thank you,
yes,
everyone.
You can just share with us now about this issue.
Okay, thank you so much. We're really humbled to be connected to this national movement. I just want to go through a couple quick thank yous. Thank you to Unlock the Box for hosting this event and for really stepping in and pushing us through the finish line. I think all of us were really exhausted after a really long year working on this issue. Thank you in particular to Scott, who's been an amazing asset to us behind the scenes and really was a key person for us to connect to early on and help us navigate the legislation. Thank you to Jane for her work behind the scenes in producing this event. Thank you to all the members of the California Coalition, all the orgs. I won't name them all now, but thank you for really throwing down this year. And also thank you to Mr. Holden, obviously, for sponsoring this legislation. And last but not least, I want to give a personal thank you to Dolores and Kevin, two impacted leaders that actually really trusted us with this issue and allowed us to work on it. It's been an absolute pleasure working alongside you all and getting to this point together in the first year. I wanted to share a little bit about the immigration aspects of the bill, but I also wanted to highlight that this bill is not only a California issue or an immigration issue, but it's also an international issue. We know that solitary confinement is used globally against people who are fighting for change, fighting for liberation, people like Nelson Mandela, and that solitary confinement is so often used to crush people's hopes and dreams and is used really as a tool by the powerful against the oppressed, right? So it's not just a conversation about reforming or changing carceral systems in the state, but it's really understanding that solitary confinement is the front line between the oppressor and the oppressed. And I think for us, it's really important to recognize that as a strategic battlefront, right? A place where we have to fight for our communities. This is a personal issue for me too. I'm an Iranian refugee, obviously someone that had to leave their country for political reasons. My dad was actually a political prisoner in Iran, a victim of torture and solitary confinement. And as I mentioned, it's an international issue for people who are forced to leave their countries, fleeing oppression, coming here, and often being locked up in immigration detention. We've got a chance to learn so much from you all about the issue of solitary nationally, and it's also been amazing to share back with folks that we've connected with about the issue of immigration detention. And some people have been very supportive and interested in learning more about how immigrants are locked up at really high rates in this country. And I'll let Lisa talk a little bit more about that in her segment. But I just want to say that we feel really passionately about stepping up, particularly over the last few years, to defend our communities, especially when ICE and Trump and this administration has really tried to criminalize immigrants and people of color and lock them away and put them in solitary confinement over and over again. We have to fight for our communities. We have to fight and win. And I think we're not here to just talk about the issue. We're here to actually fight until we liberate our communities, not just from solitary confinement, but from all these systems of oppression. I wanted to just close by sharing a personal story that I think really is a testament to the power of hope, because part of what we need to do is ensure that everyone that is in solitary confinement still has hope, right? Solitary confinement is a tool used to crush hope. It's used to break people. It's used to try and get people to stop fighting. And as I mentioned, my dad was a solitary survivor, and he was placed in solitary to try to get him to change his beliefs, to give up. But he didn't give up, and he ended up spending years in prison. But he was committed to fighting for freedom for his entire life. And I can say that I'm here because of people like him, because of people like Nelson Mandela. And a story that he shared with me recently when I was working on this bill was that when he was put in solitary confinement, the room actually had a bunch of graffiti and slogans written by other people who were in solitary confinement, urging themselves and others who were going to be placed in that room to stay strong, to fight on. And I don't know the names of the people that wrote those messages, but here, almost 50 years later, those words are still alive. Those people never anticipated those words would reach, I think, this corner of the globe or this struggle. But we all have to understand that we have choices, and our generations to come, and that we have to give hope to each other and have hope ourselves and continue to fight. So thank you all for giving us the space and time, and I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Mead, and thank you so much, Dolores, and everyone on this call. I'm really honored and humbled to hear both from the survivors and from folks who've been working on this fight for so long. And I'm really hopeful that, in California, we can get this signed and we can add to that fight. But I want to start by talking about the person who really inspired me and a lot of us to move this bill forward, and his name was Mr. Chung Woo-nan. And Vanessa talked earlier about how we really need to honor the folks who didn't make it, that the solitary can be deadly, and that there are a lot of people who've lost their lives because of it. And Mr. An was one of those people. He was a 74-year-old Korean elder who, at the height of the pandemic in May of 2020, was detained in immigration detention by a for-profit prison company. And despite having a history of depression, they knew that he had a history. And despite his vulnerabilities as an elderly man who also had physical health issues, he was put in solitary confinement and he died there by suicide. And sadly, he's not the only one. As Vanessa said, far too many families have lost loved ones because of this torture, right? That is solitary confinement. And so today we are here and Mr. An and all their Mr. Ans, right? Who've suffered this. And Gavin Newsom has the opportunity right now to make sure that other elders in our community are never subjected to the horrors of solitary confinement here in California. And I also want to highlight another way that solitary has been used as a weapon against folks in immigration detention in California. And we heard earlier from folks who were involved in hunger strikes in California's prisons, and how during that fight, that fight against solitary was used against them as a tool of oppression. And that's happening right now to folks in immigration detention. There are folks in 2 Central Valley detention centers who've been on a labor strike for more than 100 days. And they're protesting what is forced labor. They're being forced to work for $1 a day in terrible conditions in order to buy basic necessities, to buy food, to call their families. And for doing that, for exercising their right to protest, they've been threatened with solitary confinement, and several strike leaders have actually been put into solitary confinement. And so yesterday, strike leaders, they filed a complaint with the Department of Homeland Security, and they're calling for a federal investigation. And actually 12 members of Congress are supporting them, and saying that if these allegations are true, these facilities should be shut down. So, I say that to draw some parallels, right, to the situation that we've heard about, the situation in immigration detention, the situation in jails and prisons, right? It's all similar, and solitary is used against folks in similar ways. And also to show that these facilities are trying to sweep under the rug, right? And if we don't have California, if we don't have Governor Newsom taking action now to end this, it's not going to happen. And I also want to end, I want to share a statement from someone who has been in solitary confinement and immigration detention. His name is Carlos, and he asked me to share this with you. And he's actually going to be joining us for a broader conversation on Monday at 1 p.m. Pacific time on immigration and solitary confinement. So if you want to hear more from him, you can tune in for that. But I'll just briefly read a statement from him. He says, "I think it's important that Governor Newsom sign the California Mandela Act so no one has to go through what I lived through. It's hard to explain what solitary confinement does to you to someone who hasn't been through it. It really is torture. I know I'm not the only person to go through this at an immigration detention center or in jails or prisons in California. The Mandela Act is an opportunity to make sure that what I lived through doesn't happen to anyone else. So again, we hope that you'll join us on Monday for a conversation with Carlos, where we'll learn more about immigration detention and solitary. And you can check our website, californiamandelabill.org, for more information on that. Again, it's California, CA, and thank you all so much for your support. I think this rally has shown that this really is an intersectional issue. And I really believe that with all of us, with all of your support, we can make Governor Newsom see how important this is for all of our communities and sign this bill.
Thank you so much, both Hamid and Lisa, for sharing. And I just want to say before I pass on to Johnny, you know, when we set our intention and I said the word perseverance, it was actually working with you all that made me feel that word and set that word. Your perseverance, Hamid and Lisa and Jackie and Edwin, the folks from Next Gen, and so many, right? I mean, I shouldn't have started that, because your perseverance and your commitment has just, it's been such an honor to work with you in this space. And I thank you for everything that you're doing, and that you did not settle for amendments in the bill, that you stayed true to the spirit of the bill, right? Because this was not about a win for you, this was about a win for the people. And the legislation, you stayed true to the heart of the matter and the wording, and just your perseverance and your commitment and everything that you've been putting forth. Hamid, thank you for sharing your personal experience with your father, and just sending lots of love, you know, your way. And just, I could go on and on. So now what I'll go ahead and do is pass it to Johnny now. And thank you so much for sharing this space with us all.
Yeah, thank you all. And I'll say, as a person that was born in Cuba, and to this day, I still have the collateral consequences of just being involved with the system and potentially being separated from my family. Immigration detention is something that's also very high in my thoughts and things like that. So just appreciate the work that you're all doing as well in that space. And to echo, I mean, it is an international issue, and I think that faith leaders around the country have agreed on one thing, and that is the solitary confinement is torture. Our legislators, oftentimes tout values on the campaign trail that later on do not reflect the policies that they pass. So it's the responsibility of faith leaders to hold our legislators morally accountable to the values that they say they stand on and protect the very moral fabric of our society. There's one thing that I know is that how we treat people says more about us than it says about them, and everybody has something to answer to. So right now I want to take a moment to share a short video from one of our allies in working in the faith movement, Mr. Bishop Mark Henley Andrews. He is with the Episcopal Diocese of California. He has a really short message to share with us all. Thanks.
Greetings. I am the Right Reverend Dr. Mark Andrews. As the 8th Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of California, I join my voice today with all those calling on our Governor Gavin Newsom, to do what is moral and just by signing the California Mandela Act on solitary confinement into law. This act, which places limits on the use of solitary confinement in California jails, prisons, and immigrant detention centers, passed the California legislature and is now on Governor Newsom's desk. In 2018, at our 79th General Convention, the Episcopal Church adopted one of the strongest positions in opposition to the torture of solitary confinement, reinvigorating our church's commitment to ending this damaging and inhumane practice, and encouraging all Episcopalians to urge their governments to seek alternatives to isolated confinement. Yesterday, faith leaders delivered an interfaith letter to Governor Newsom, signed by religious organizations and faith communities throughout California, who are united in calling for the California Mandela Act on solitary to become law. The torture of solitary confinement is immoral. It has no place in our state. It is time for California to take a stand and join the growing movement to end this inhumane practice. Thank you.
And now you're going to hear from Reverend Ron Steve, Executive Director of the National Religious Campaign, telling Governor Newsom on behalf of 37 Faith California organizations to sign the bill. Thanks.
Dear Governor Newsom, as leading California religious organizations representing a diversity of faith communities throughout our state, we write with a sense of moral urgency to call on you to sign the California Mandela Act on solitary confinement into law. This legislation, inspired by the United Nations Nelson Mandela Rules, which defines prolonged solitary confinement as torture, provides an opportunity for California to move to the right side of history in relationship to this critical human rights issue. The United Nations, leading medical and mental health experts, and other developed nations broadly recognize the use of prolonged solitary confinement as a form of torture. And yet in our nation, the practice is commonplace and largely unregulated. Individuals can be held in isolated conditions of confinement for months, years, and here in California, even decades. Yet the tide is turning, and in 2022, Connecticut became the third state in the U.S. to ban prolonged isolated confinement legislatively, following New Jersey in 2019 and New York in 2021. Now is the time for California to keep pace with the national movement to end this devastating practice, impacting thousands of incarcerated people, their families and loved ones, and our communities to which they return. The California Mandela Act on solitary confinement defines solitary confinement as any period of confinement that exceeds 17 hours in a cell, mandates that facilities document any instance in which solitary is used, and places limits on the duration any person can be held in these conditions. The bill also bans the use of solitary confinement for certain populations, including people who are pregnant, have disabilities, or fall within certain age limits. Our various faith traditions hold in common a belief in the inherent dignity and worth of each human person. Complete isolation violates basic religious values of redemption, compassion, and restorative justice. As religious organizations, we stand in solidarity with the leadership of detained and formerly incarcerated individuals and their families who have worked tirelessly on this issue and have called upon us to join them in this sacred pursuit. In 2013, over 30,000 people organized inside California prisons to protest solitary confinement, and communities of faith and religious leaders nationwide expressed their solidarity and support. Today, the California Mandela Act builds upon these decades of work done by detained individuals, activists, and organizers to replace the tombs of solitary confinement with rehabilitation, restorative justice, and community. Solitary confinement is torture. As moral leaders in our state, we call upon you to use the power of your pen to end this destructive practice that violates basic principles of human rights and the inherent God-given human dignity bestowed on all. We urge you to sign the California Mandela Act into law today.
Thank you so much. Just want to give a special shout out and lots of love to NERCAT, National Religious Campaign Against Torture. I will never forget during the 2011 hunger strikes, the first ones they immediately reached out to me and to the families and said, we're here to support you and we're here to support the hunger strikers. And on August 23rd, 2011, they met with us in person in Sacramento for the first assembly hearing that took place in regards to the hunger strikes. And just so, you know, they've been so committed and so supportive and sending lots of love and appreciation your way. And so when we opened up in this meeting, we set our intention, right? There were so many different words: rehabilitation, perseverance, commitment, hope. And so what we'd like to do now is we'd like to take a moment to set our intention for moving forward in 2 words. What are you taking away from this event, and what do you want to put out into the world? And so what I would like to leave here and not go back to at all is doubt. I'm leaving doubt. There's no more doubt. And what I want to take into the world is strength, because I have been so strengthened and empowered and renewed just by having all of you here and this work that's been moving forward. And so I really want to thank you for that. And with that, if everybody just wants to drop into the chat what they're leaving and what they're taking away and sticking to. And thank you all so, so much that have been part of this event.
Thank you, Dolores. For me, you know, I received and got motivation, energy, you know, and I'm leaving with a sense of urgency. There are people in solitary right now as we speak. You know, their next meal is at 5 o'clock, and after that, they won't eat again till 7 a.m. So I'm just really leaving with a huge sense of urgency, and also just motivated to advance this forward. Thanks.
Hamid, do you want to leave something here and take something back with you? Is Hamid on?
Leaving with hope.
Yes.
Hope that we can step forward and we can make some progress, and leaving with hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lisa, what are you leaving here and taking back?
Ooh, I think I'm leaving some anxiety and worry about, you know, is this possible? Can we do this? I think we can do this. And I'm leaving here with solidarity. For me, that's what I've seen on this call today, and it's been beautiful.
Thank you so much. Okay. And with that, we're going to close out this event now, but continue on in the work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Peace.